Rob's Child here with Chapter 25 of Security Analysis. Nothing I say is investment advice, and I do not intend to replace the value of this book, but open it for discussion and enhance our learning of the material of this biblical text of security analysis. Well, quick side note to start. I am excited because we are, if you can see, about what it looks like about halfway, probably further than halfway because the appendix is so large. But we are almost to the finally to the point of part 4, chapter 27, where we finally start learning about actual stonks, right? Thank goodness. This has been a heck of a ride so far. We're so close to finally getting into the part that people really care about more than anything, the stocks part. But so this chapter, like all the other chapters, there's a lot of it is, why do I have to learn this? It's good stuff. If you know what's going on under the hood of the shiny stocks of a company, all it can do is help you. So let's dive right in. So chapter 25, titled Senior Securities with Warrants, Participating Issues, Switching, and Hedging. So sort of 3 parts here. So he starts the chapter off seemingly to review things that we've already gone over. I guess just to make sure we get it. I mean, he reviews the basics of the sliding scale warrants, like anti-dilution type against anti-dilution, and also for acquisition. The rules apply in acquisition, like if your shares get switched over to the new company's shares, things like that. We also review next the block subscription type, where the first 25% get converted at the certain price, and then a higher price for the next block, and how it detracts the value because it's a race to convert until the final price has been reached, and then it's like, well, and everybody can get that conversion at that point. So he reviews those 2 things, and then we have a review of essentially the convertible versus subscription types, involving especially bonds that give you the option of converting or subscripting. And there's one point I want to add to this chapter that's important, just to remember that warrants are not always detachable. Some are only exercisable, and in that time it would be a piece of paper you'd carry, and now it's all digital. But to exercise that warrant, a point he brings up here, bonds with detachable warrants, sometimes it's wise to sell the warrant because the underlying bond is selling at a premium. If that's happening, you can get extra profit on top of the profit of the warrant that you made. If a company's doing really well, the credit's probably better. They're making their bonds a little more valuable. I think that was the point of that. And so, yeah, it's funny. As I was reading this, I wrote, I got to remember the warrants aren't always detachable. And then he does a whole section on that. So how the detachability. And one neat point I don't think I remember reading about before was how detachability can be delayed. So, it's attached to the bond until a certain date, and then you can separate it. You can sell it as a warrant. Otherwise, before then, maybe it's just exercisable as a subscription type of speculative feature. So then, he mentions at this point too how warrants, an important part of this is warrants always have a certain value, even if they're actually worthless. A warrant that says, oh, you can buy this stock at $20 and the stock's at $10, the warrant is actually worth nothing, but it still has a premium. People still pay for it, and it has a little to do with the fact that it eventually expires. But yeah, and it provides obviously leverage of sorts. So because of the cost of the warrant, while it's worthless, it's you're paying. I think you can follow that logic. He goes on to discuss, why would a company have a feature, have a bond, have a warrant that has a delayed time to take it off the bond, and it makes sense. He talks about how it's a way to prevent a bond from dropping in price if there's like a lot of speculators. So if there's a lot of bonds that have these warrants and they're bought up eagerly by people that are simply speculating on it too much, you can have a wave of selling, and that can decrease the cost of the bond. And it's just not a good look for the company, especially one that hasn't been so well established. The idea having it be delayed is, hoping that, okay, we are a real company, we can pay off our credit, we have visibility, we have real products, or services or whatever, and by that point, all right, now we can detach the warrants and see what happens. And so that kind of makes sense. Yes, and so giving time for the corporation to become established. Next point, he wants to talk about how speculative warrants are. Warrants are fun. If you haven't dived into them, I have found warrants easily available with symbols. Sometimes you'll have a stock symbol followed by a W, and that's the warrant. And you gotta know what the exercise price is and what the deadline is, what the expiration is of it. Usually it's many years, like 3-4 years in the future. They are fun speculative ways if you to gain a lot of leverage on something. I particularly have a little bit of that on some Bitcoin mining companies, not due till 2027. It's 2023 right now, so 4 years. That's one of my fun positions I like holding that can go parabolic. But I digress. Speaking of warrants, he mentions an example in 1929, which of course was similar to like the .com bubble. It was a massive bubble of assets. He says there were warrants on a railroad company that were worth $1 billion, which ended up being that amount, $1 billion, was more than the total market cap of all of the railroad stocks combined only 3 years later in 1932. And these are just warrants, like just to show the kind of scale of how epic warrants can get, involving leverage and in a really excited market condition. So yeah, and he mentions too how he talks about warrants alone, discussed later in the book, and how those can be analyzed and used. I can't wait to get to that section. I'm looking forward to that a lot. So then we keep going here. Section on participating issues, participating bonds. Found it interesting to find out that some participating bonds function more like preferred shares that have kind of like a sliding scale of sorts. So if a company has a certain amount of earnings, then able to, then they get a 7% dividend, for example, and then if they have, this over this amount of earnings, it's a 9%. It's of course based on par, so it functions, ends up functioning more like a preferred share sometimes, that can change depending on the earnings that the company has. And then you have other types that are obviously that are just connected to the common. So it's, you get, this, it has the participating rate of this many common shares, and so you just get that extra dividend on top of it. So yeah, so there's a section on that. Next, he goes on to this section about arbitrage. Basically, arbitrage. This is the switching and hedging part of the book, as part of the title, and he kind of gloats a little bit about a special arbitrage situation, as long as you have enough money. And he goes on, he talks about the risks later on in it, and how sorry, that part I just talked about is the second part of this, involving needing to have enough money. The first part is simply arbitrage, and it's something that the public often ignores because it's not plain, it's not out there. He talks about how sometimes you can have stock trading at parity with a convertible bond, and in that situation the bond is obviously undervalued compared to the stock, and in that kind of case it's an easy way to either trade them in, or sell the stock, buy the bonds that have that convertibility, and it's an easy win, and it's a move that you can make to add safety, or as well as hold on to the speculation. So if the stock keeps going up, then your bonds that can be convertible still increase in value. But if it goes down, then it doesn't matter. You still have the safety now of the fact that it's a bond in the first place. So that is kind of an interesting, that was the switching part of it. And then the hedging part is the other part of this. Sorry for mistakes in any of these videos. Someday maybe I'll redo them. But for now, we'll just finish this chapter. So he talks about the hedging method when the whole market declines, and say you have a convertible bond. One thing you can do to take advantage of this is to short the stock. So not if you own it. Not if you own it. He says you want to buy the convertible bond and short the stock at the same time if they're trading at parity. And that's a method that you can use to take advantage of having the security of the bond and potentially making money while it's shorting. And he likes this particular form of hedging. He then suggests an alternate way of hedging, which he says I think he prefers, which is to actually short half of the conversion of the convertible bond, because in that case you win either way. If it goes, if the price goes way up, you can convert half of it and you don't lose anything, and you gain on the value of your convertible. But if it goes down, then the amount you shorted, obviously you make gains on that. And this scenario is really best if you can find a bond that's really secure compared to its stock. So let's say you have a company that the stock is, for whatever reason, like crazy volatile, and the bond is very secure. The company makes money, they always pay their payments, what comes to mind immediately is, like, I've mentioned it before in some of my other videos, just a stock I'm pretty familiar with, Star Bulk Carriers. If you could have that situation with that company, that might be a great place. But yeah, that's where that's the situation he talks about, where you really have to have enough capital up front to be able to do it. You have to be, to maintain the position, pay the fees, deal with, all of the details there. So that's chapter 25 in a nutshell. Next we have 26. And then we're finally talking about stocks in chapter 27. I can't wait. It's going to be fun. One more chapter, and then we get to the good part. But that's all for chapter 25. Please discuss anything you learned about the chapter, anything I said, in the comments below. And see you next time, Rob's Child.